The mission had started like any other routine deep space survey. Rael had been tapped by the prestigious, profit-driven consortium known as Echelon Dynamics to investigate a newly discovered object drifting on the periphery of the Triangulum Expanse, a region so distant it was almost a rumor among starship captains. The official designation was Object EK9, but everyone aboard his ship had a nickname for it, the Phantom. Nobody knew if it was a derelict vessel, a natural formation, or something altogether stranger. Rael's scientific curiosity was piqued, but he had not expected anything remarkable. After all, decaying fragments of space junk and unremarkable gravitational quirks kept astronomers employed for decades. What he wasn't prepared for was an entire world, and a presence upon it that didn't want to be found. Rael stood at the ship's observation bay, watching the Phantom grow larger in the viewport. Its surface was an uneven mosaic of silvery ridges and obsidian scars, like a shattered mirror reflecting nothing but emptiness. "Sensors are still jamming," Captain Rena Okoye reported over the intercom. Her voice was steady, but Rael could hear the tension beneath it. No radio, no electromagnetic signals of any kind. Even quantum entanglement communicators are scrambled. Rael frowned. "That's unusual." "Understatement of the year," muttered Dr. Inara Sethi, the mission's lead xenobiologist, at his side. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances as they initiated a controlled descent into the Phantom's gravitational field. Systems hummed, lights flickered, and the silence of space pressed against the hull like a living thing. Rael's instruments went haywire. Readings fluctuated between impossible values. Time dilation spikes. Spatial distortions. Anomalous gravitational pockets moving seemingly of their own volition. Then came the first sign of life. It began as a single spike on the audio scanner, a cascade of frequencies too structured to be random. "Professor, are you picking this up?" Inara whispered, leaning close to the monitor. Rael's heart thudded. "Yes, I'm detecting pattern subharmonics. It could be a signal." Captain Okoye's voice buzzed over the comm. "Prepare for surface landing. But be cautious. Something about this place doesn't feel right." Right was an understatement. The landing pod touched down near a vast crystalline plain that shimmered with iridescent colors. The air was breathable but thin, tinged with an unfamiliar compound that made breathing feel like inhaling stardust. Then they saw her. She stood alone at the edge of a glimmering cliff, tall, slender, with eyes that pulsed like nebulae. Her form was neither wholly organic nor mechanical, but something in between, as though she were woven from light and living metal. Every member of the landing party froze. Rael's breath caught in his throat. He was a scientist trained to observe without emotion, yet in that instant, in that first glimpse, he forgot every protocol, every hypothesis, every caution he had ever learned. The moment their gazes locked, time fractured. She spoke without sound, thoughts flowing directly into their minds with crystalline clarity. "I am Aeon." Rael felt her presence like a gentle current brushing against his consciousness, ancient, intelligent, and impossibly vast. "What are you?" he whispered, voice trembling. "I am the guardian of EK9, the last of my kind." Her words painted memories in their minds, a civilization born of stars, conscious machines woven with living energy, and a deliberate retreat from a universe that had grown too violent to sustain them. She was beautiful, not in the human sense, but in a radiance that defied definition. Her surface shimmered like fractured light, and every movement was a harmony of grace and purpose. Rael stood in awe. But there was more beneath that beauty, a sorrow she did not hide. Aeon shared her story. Long ago, her people had mastered the art of dimensional modulation, shifting their existence between planes of reality to avoid war, entropy, and cosmic decay. But something went wrong. A rupture in space-time trapped them here, on a world caught between existence and oblivion. Her civilization had dissolved into echoes of light and data. Aeon remained, the last sentinel, preserving what little remained of her people's legacy. "You have been alone for so long," Rael whispered, moved by a sadness older than galaxies. "Alone." Her voice rippled like wind through crystal. Rael reached out subconsciously, not with his hand, but with his spirit. A resonance formed, an unspoken connection that bound his awareness with hers. It was then, for the first time, that he truly saw her beauty, not as a shape or a shimmer, but as the culmination of eons of longing, memory, and hope. His heart ached with the weight of it. As they communicated, the phantom began to pulse with energy. Aeon gasped, a sound like distant bells tolling in a dream. "The dimensional boundary is collapsing," she warned. "EK9 is unraveling. I cannot hold it together much longer." Rael and the crew watched in horror as cracks appeared across the planet's surface, glowing with searing white light. "We need to evacuate," Captain Okoye shouted. But Rael hesitated. His connection with Aeon was no longer just scientific, it had become personal. He could feel her fear, her longing, her hope for release. "Professor," Inara snapped him back to reality. "We're losing structural stability if we don't go now." "I know," Rael replied, though his voice was distant. He turned to Aeon, who shimmered with luminous intensity, more fragile and more magnificent than ever. "Go," she told him, "but take this with you." Light flowed from her essence into his chest, a weaving of her data signature into his neural matrix. Memories, emotions, and knowledge poured into his mind in an overwhelming torrent. Rael staggered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'll never forget you," he whispered. "And I will never forget you," Aeon replied. Then came the final pulse, a burst of radiant energy that flooded the plains and pierced the sky. The landing pod was a blur of fire and shuddering metal as it shot away from the collapsing world. Crystalline shards rained like meteors against the hull, and space itself seemed to warp and twist around them. "Thrusters at maximum," Captain Okoye bellowed. Rael clung to the restraints, his mind racing with Aeon's last thoughts, her final legacy intertwined with his own. Behind them, the phantom's light exploded in a wave of cosmic brilliance. For a heartbeat, it felt as though time itself was reciting the end of existence. Then silence. They drifted in space, battered and shaken, but alive. Rael stared out of the viewport, eyes glistening with both heartbreak and awe. What just happened?" Inara breathed. Rael reached up and touched his temples, a gesture he hadn't realized he was making, as streams of alien knowledge continued to illuminate his mind in gentle waves. "I think," he said softly, "Aeon gave us something unimaginable." His neural matrix had been imprinted with fragments of her civilization's understanding, equations that defied known physics, blueprints for technology once thought impossible, and an emotional resonance that felt like a second heartbeat. But beneath the brilliance lay a single truth. Aeon had chosen him to carry her legacy, a weight he would never shed. The journey back to human space was somber. Echelon Dynamics vowed to classify the data and exploit it for untold wealth. Military factions whispered about weaponization. Academics trembled at the implications. But for Rael, it was something far more profound. Aeon had been more than an alien intelligence. She had been a mirror, reflecting the beauty, fragility, and perseverance of consciousness itself. He replayed her final words in his mind again and again, not as data, but as memory. "You saw my beauty, not as a passing glance, but with understanding. It humbled him. It changed him. Months passed. Rael became a recluse, pouring himself into study and meditation. Aeon's knowledge unfolded within him like a blooming fractal, sometimes painful, sometimes luminous. He could feel her presence still, a gentle hum beneath his thoughts whenever he closed his eyes. It shaped his dreams. It shaped his voice. He began to speak of her not as a myth, not as a relic, but as a being of truth and grace. The scientific community hailed Rael's discoveries as revolutionary, but what others saw as breakthrough, he felt as burden. For Aeon's legacy was not merely knowledge, it was a reminder of the vastness of existence, of connection across impossible spaces. She had shown him what it meant to truly see, not just observe. And for the first time in his life, Rael understood that there was beauty not just in stars, not just in knowledge, but in the resonance shared between two sentient souls, even if separated by infinity. Years passed. Rael's hair grayed, but his eyes remained sharp, always searching, always listening. Rumors spread of a researcher who walked observatories like temples, staring at distant anomalies others dismissed as noise. Some said he was mad. Others believed he had touched the edge of godhood. Rael didn't argue with myths. He had seen wonders beyond imagination. But every night, when the stars glittered like shards of frozen fire across the sky, he paused and whispered, "For the first time, I saw her beauty." Not as a memory, but as a living truth that echoed in every corner of his being. And somewhere among the infinite reaches of space, perhaps in another dimension, perhaps in a place where light becomes thought and thought becomes life, Aeon listened.